This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
All right, what's up, fantasy book fans? This is Steven, your host with Fantology Podcast, along with my lifelong friend Ben, and we have a very special guest. We have Benedict Jacka over across the pond from us, who's been gracious enough to come on the show and talk about his new book, An Inheritance of Magic, and that'll be kind of the first half of the episode, and then we'll get into some Alex Verus spoiler questions. So if you haven't read anything from Benedict, stick around and hear about his new book, and then if you are a big fan, stick around until the end and maybe get some insights into the series. So Benedict, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. It's fun when we have authors on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me over. It's nice to meet you guys.
Yeah. So we've been reading Alex Verus over the past few months and actually just finished like earlier this week. So this is this is just prime time for us to be chatting with you. But we also got an advanced copy of An Inheritance of Magic, which comes out October 10th in the States. I think there might be a different release date over in the UK.
It's October the 5th UK, I think, in rest of the world, and 10th for US and Canada.
Nice.
Still around from usual. Normally my US publishers seem to go out of the way to schedule their release a few days before my UK ones, but this time my UK ones got the jump on it for whatever reason.
Interesting.
But let's talk about that a little bit and just kind of like you as an author a little bit here to start us off. So just introduce yourself to listeners. Tell us how you got started as an author, your journey, and what you write, and why people need to read more Benedict Jacka.
Let's see, my story, how I got started. That's a really long one. Because I started writing books in 1999, 2000 or so, but I actually got the Alex Verus series published in 2012, and an awful lot of stuff happened between the two.
Your author bio is really interesting. At the end of the books, it's like you've done all these different jobs, including bouncer and studied abroad and all these things.
Yeah, well, originally I was a children's author. That was the first books were children's fantasy books. Then the first books I had published were children's books. That was in the mid-2000s. And commercially, they were a complete flop. So my publisher dropped me, and then the next bunch of books I published all got rejected. So by late 2000s, it had actually got to the point where I decided that being an author was just not going to work out. So I actually hit the point where I gave up. I decided to do a career change, did some thinking, and decided to retrain as a lawyer. Did something called a GDL, which is like an accelerated 1-year law conversion course. And I'd booked for that, went off and did some teaching contracts for a year, went back, got ready to go back to college again. And then I think it was 2 weeks before I was due to start at my London Law College, I got an email from my agent saying, "Hey, you know that lost manuscript you left with me? Well, we've got this, there's this editor at Orbit who says he might be interested. You want to come in for a meeting?"
Wow.
And I did, and they said, "Oh, so we read your book. We kind of like it. We don't think it's good enough to be published right now. But if you rewrote it along about these lines and did X, Y, Z, well, then we still might not publish it, but we'd kind of consider it. So, would you be interested?"
Sounds like a tough decision. Like you're about to start as a lawyer, and you could also pursue your dream as a writer.
Yeah, kind of. But from my point of view, we won't publish it if we don't like it, was where I was anyway. So I wasn't really losing anything. It was just a matter of, am I willing to put in the extra time and effort? Which I was, although it did mean that all of the first book, Fated, got rewritten while I was doing law coursework at the same time, which did make things difficult.
Well, as somebody that's currently sitting in a law library, waiting for my second year to start, I can sympathize with that.
Yeah, so the pattern was for that year was during the day I do law lectures and study groups, then come back in the evening and do prep for the next study group the next day, and then usually between around 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. or something, when I was done with everything else, then I'd go and do the editing for Fated, and that was my schedule back then. Anyway, I ended up sending it off, and sending it off, waited for a while, then started it to get some encouraging signs from my agent. And then back in the spring, when I was about halfway through the law course, I went and checked my email to see a message from her saying, "So how many books do you envisage in the series? And could you write another book in 6 months?"
6 months.
And everything kind of snowballed from there.
Wow.
So how long did you actually like practice law before switching over to full-time author?
I didn't. That was the funny thing, because I did my law course and then my conversion law course, and I was pretty good at it. I got good marks at everything and so on, and did well. The thing is, it turns out that doing a law course is nothing compared to actually getting a job in law in the UK afterwards, because the ratio of applicants to training places at law firms, you don't even want to know how bad it is. And short version was, it got to a point where after I'd finally finished my qualified, it got to a point where doing law applications was basically its own job, just like writing, except it was a way more unpleasant job than writing, and I wasn't getting paid for it. And at that point, the writing had got to the point where I was getting paid for it. So I decided I'm going to pick, I'm tentatively, until something changes, I'm going to pick the job which doesn't make me want to kill myself and is actually earning me a living.
Well, we're very glad you did, because I mean, Alex Verus was an amazing series. So
I very nearly didn't. Basically, if that Orbit editor, a guy called Darren Nash, hadn't picked up the manuscript back then, I just would have committed fully to the law career and stuck with it.
That's crazy.
So Alex Verus wrapped in 2021. Is that?
Yeah. That was a publication date. I finished the book the year before in 2020.
And so since then, you've started a new series, and Inheritance of Magic comes out in October. So I imagine there's been a little bit gap here as you've planned out the new series, written the first book. And I think you said you just completed second book. So we're well on our way kind of into a new universe. So tell people that have read Alex Verus, or maybe that haven't, like what can they expect in your new series?
Yeah, I'm always really bad at doing these kinds of sales pitches. That whenever I send it off to an editor, I usually just kind of hope they're going to read the book and do it for me, but I'll do my best. Let's see. So it's an urban fantasy series similar to the Alex Verus one. Alex Verus. It's got a lot of the same elements. There's a hidden magical world rather than overt magical world. There's some mystery and investigation. The protagonist's a bit of an underdog and has to outthink opponents. A fair amount of danger and action, and that's various differences. Though one is that the main character's a fair bit younger this time. Mm-hmm. With Alex Verus, he was sort of a very experienced journeyman, very young master type. He knew most of what there was to know about the magical world. So particularly the first few books is kind of Alex giving people a bit of a tour of the magical world and explaining things to them. Since he's pretty knowledgeable about this stuff, whenever something comes up, Alex can say, "Oh yeah, I know about this. This is X, Y, and Z," and can explain it to the readers or to Luna or to whoever's around. The new series, the main character Stephen doesn't know all of this stuff, so the readers learn about it at the same time that he does. That's one big difference. Others, the magic system works very differently. I wanted to try something that was a bit different.
Yeah.
And and the magic system grew out of a slightly weird secondary interest of mine, which was I was interested in the economics of a magical world, the whole concept of scarcity of resources and so on. In Alex Verus, Alex has a shop, but buying and selling and transactions aren't really important. It's just his day job, and he actually specifically says a couple of times he doesn't particularly need the money or care about it. The main thing he likes it for is that it works as a front to get in touch with it, that puts him in touch with people. With this one, the way magic works, there are certain elements of it that are very limited resources. There's only so much of it to go around, and the magical and the real world economies are integrated, which means that any of this stuff can be bought with real world money and is bought and sold with real world money, which causes a whole bunch of things to work differently. One of which is that the people in control of it are generally just the rich people.
Yeah, I think
really
that's pretty good.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the whole economy part of the magic. And you've even, like, this is very different from Alex Verus, to the point where you have, like, at the end of the book, there's a whole glossary of notes of, like, here's terms of how the magic works, and here are a bunch of kind of definitions around it. So it's a lot more rule based than Alex Verus, where Alex, you had like different types of magic and different abilities associated with each, but in this case, they're pretty like hard and fast. This is how magic works.
Yeah, I hadn't originally planned to do it that way, but the way it ended up working out, the magic system had so many details. I figured it probably does actually make sense just to have a explanation at the end. I've tried to write the book so that you don't need it, but I figure it's still useful, because you don't want to write a book such that the readers need to look stuff up in a glossary at the end. But it's just meant to be helpful. What I was going for with it was the same as the glossaries in the Wheel of Time. You don't need to read them, but if you're interested in the series, you are going to read them, and you'll find out little things as a result.
Yeah, or Sanderson does kind of similar things with his Ars Arcanum at the end, and I enjoy those. I think it's fun to just get like, the textbook version of, a small textbook version of what's going on.
Yeah, pretty much.
It also seems. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it also seems like one small difference is that inheritance of magic seems like it's less of a inherited magic system. Like with Alex, you basically have to be born a mage in order to use magic, right? Whereas I'm not quite sure how the mechanics work, but it seems more if you can afford the magic, then you can use it.
Pretty much,
inheritance of magic.
One of the influences with Alex Verus, magic is the inherent gift thing, where you're either a mage or an adept, or you're not, and there's not very much anyone can do to change that. With Inheritance of Magic, one of the influences I had on it was Shadowrun. I don't know if you guys have ever played the game or you're familiar with that. Do you know?
No,
I don't.
No, it's a sort of science fiction cyberpunk thing where it's a futuristic dystopia with mega corporations ruling everything, except you also have elves and dwarves and orcs and magic and stuff. Don't try and make sense of it. It's very much we're just going to have these things together, and this is just how it works. That sort of setting. But one of the things that has is you have all of these magical things rolling around, and you also have corporations running everything. So you have things like cyberware and bioware and body modifications, and the way people get them is they just go to the local outlet branch of the corporation or whatever, and they buy it, and there are very clearly defined prices for all these things, where if you want like times 1.5 boosted reflexes, it costs this much. If you want times 2 boosted reflexes, it's like 5 times as much, this much. If you want 3 times boosted reflexes, you'd better really be rich because the price goes up to this much. And so on for every possible body enhancement and cyberware enhancement or body replacement and so on. There's an exact price tag for it. And that was one of the instances here when instead of cyberware and bioware and body modifications, it's sigils that give you abilities, but it's the same sort of idea in that there is literally a catalog that you can order this stuff out of.
Yeah, I really liked it because it makes me feel like with most fantasy books, I'm reading about the magic system, like, well, that's like, I can't actually do that though. But for some reason with Inheritance Magic, I'm like, that would be cool to just be able, like, I could actually envision myself doing that, And so I thought it was maybe one of the first times I actually felt like that during a fantasy book. So I appreciated that aspect of it.
Yeah, I totally see like the RPG elements that you're describing. And I also got like big kind of superhero origin story type vibes through the first book, where we have this character who's down on his luck and he uncovers his ability and slowly levels up and has a series of different conflicts that go his way or don't go his way. And I really enjoyed that because I can't think of too many other books that give me that like origin story superhero vibe. For some reason this was very superhero for me. I don't know, maybe I've been watching a lot of Marvel stuff lately or something, but I like
maybe the bigger influence on it was the subgenre that they call progression fantasy. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
you've
the Cradle
read Will Wright's Cradle series. It's that sort of thing. It's definitely got roots in the superhero genre as well, but there's less of a sudden change from first you're ordinary and then you're a superhero, and more of a gradual leveling up and climb.
So this is another first person after Alex Verus, which was 12 and I guess 12 and a half books of first person. So did you consider switching it, or do you enjoy first person, or what was some of the thoughts there?
I did consider it. I actually tried doing a third person story in between. I did a novella that was third person instead of first person. And
is that the other? We haven't read the Alex Verus novella yet. Is that what you're referring to?
There are two of them. There's an older one called Favors that came out before Risen, and then there's one called Gardens that came out after Risen. And the second one, that one, Gardens, is the one I'm talking about. That one's third person. So I got to give it a try. And yeah, it worked fine. Honestly, I got the feeling that I wasn't really missing much. And I might as well stick with first person since I could do the same sorts of things, and I liked it.
Yeah.
Third person does have some advantages in that you get to juggle multiple different points of view, but I quite like the style of story that just follows a single protagonist. I think some authors, they like to do things that epic fantasy the thing that epic fantasy authors do, where you'll have a main set of anywhere up to 5-ish main characters, and they're following all of their stories at the same time. But I tend to prefer the more ones that are just focused on one person. So first person's a natural choice for that, because if you're just doing the entire thing following one person anyway, you might as well show it from inside their head.
Yeah, it definitely makes it one more bingeable, right? I binged most of Alex Verus in a few months, and then I think it also makes it allows you to be able to have smaller scale conflicts that still seem super important, because you're experiencing it through the eyes of the protagonist, which I feel works really well for a character like Stephen in Inheritance of Magic. It makes it so that we can really kind of get behind his causes and root for him. Whereas like maybe if it was third person, I wouldn't care as much about those things. So I think that it was a good call to stick with first person for Inheritance.
It also might just be I'm sticking with what works approach, because the Alex Verus was my big break, and that was first person, and a lot of the previous, I think all of the previous books, manuscripts I wrote that either didn't get published or weren't particularly successful were third person.
Sure.
Yeah, well, there's an indication there in the data, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm just so part of it is just me sticking with what I've had success with.
So as an author, we've kind of talked about this, but was there anything that was really different between Alex Verus and Stephen Oakwood, or things that were more challenging or less challenging?
You mean about writing it?
Yeah.
One really big difference is that for this one, I've actually planned out the series much more from the beginning. With Alex Verus, I think Stephen, you read the author commentaries on my site. I remember one of you guys read.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, you have a lot of kind of bonus content on your site.
Yeah, that's
cool.
Anyway, so you'll know that with the Alex Verus series, I didn't plan it out in advance because I didn't plan it out to be a series at all. There was just the first book, which was the number X in a long line of manuscripts, all the previous ones of which have been rejected. And this one was probably going to get rejected too. And then books 2 and 3, Cursed and Taken, were, okay, these are books 2 and 3 in a contract for books 1, 2, and 3. So my publishers have committed to publishing 3 books. There is no promise at all, no guarantee at all that it's going to go beyond 3 books. So it was only after I'd written all the first 3 books and then got a contract for 2 more books after that I started seriously thinking, okay, let's start planning how this is going to go in the long run. Whereas with this one, the Inheritance series, I did plan it out to be a series from the beginning. So there's a lot more different balls I'm juggling, I guess. There are several different storylines that I had planned out from the beginning that are all running.
So I guess without giving us any spoilers for this series, like what are we expecting as far as length, or like what are your like high level visions for where you're hoping the series goes?
For length, if I had to guess, I'd say probably something similar to the Alex Verus length, maybe about 12-ish books. That's just kind of plucked out of thin air, though. I don't know if that's how it'll work in practice. Also, that does depend on it actually being successful. It might be that everyone's going to hate it and it'll crash, at which point I'll just have to give up on it and do something else.
I don't think that's true. I've been recommending the Alex Verus series far and wide since I got about halfway through it, and we've been urging people to buy Inheritance when it comes out. So from our perspective, I think it's going to be a big hit. So
I hope so. I've really done my best with this. I put a ton of effort and work into it, so it's going to be pretty crushing if it doesn't succeed. But you never know.
Yeah.
But I have actually dealt with the whole book series failing before things. So while it would really, really suck for me to spend X many years on this new one and for it to be a failure, I've survived it once, so I can survive it again.
Gotcha.
And as far as urban fantasy goes, like there's not a ton of big, long urban fantasy series that I've really, really enjoyed. Like Dresden Files is kind of the one that I think people point to as like, this is the most popular urban fantasy out there. But Alex Verus is right there with it for me.
Oh, that's good to know. Alex Verus isn't right up there in the top 10, but I think it probably makes the top 20 or so. There was a site I used to that used to run most popular urban fantasy authors.
Interesting
thing. Can't remember the name of this at this point, but based on just sales data and popularity and so on, I used to fairly consistently rank in between number 10 and number 20. So that's pretty good. I'm happy with that.
That's really good. Yeah.
Speaking of Dresden, was that somewhat of an influence for you? Like your books have the quote from from Jim Butcher, and there's the call out in the first book, and
Yeah, it was an influence, but not as big a one as people tend to think. I think at one point I actually made a list of all the things that influenced the series. I had some vague idea of using that as some kind of quiz promotion thing. I'd do a thing where I'd challenge all of my readers to guess it, and I'd give them points based on how many of the numbers they got, and based on how close they got to the top 10 list, and give some sort of prize to whoever got the best one. And I think I ranked Dresden as like number 3 or 4. Can't remember which.
So interesting.
It was
that fits actually pretty well. Yeah.
It was an influence, but it wasn't the biggest influence. And I think the things that influenced it, where Dresden did influence Alex Verus, aren't the things that most people think influenced it.
Well, that's interesting.
Now we need to know, like, what are influences 1 and 2 at least.
I've mostly kept those ones quiet. Because I like to see if people will guess them. And I have actually had people guess influences 1, 2, and 3, but very few of them. It's like obscure corners of the internet type thing. I like every now and again I'll do a Google search for Alex Verus, and every now and again I'll find just one person on some random message board somewhere putting in a comment being, I think it was influenced by this thing because this thing feels just like it, and I've read it and gone, yeah, he got it exactly right. But there are only like, I've seen that about like 3 times in all of the years.
Interesting.
That's funny.
It's definitely guessable, but it's obscure enough that very few people guess it.
Oh man.
Was it now okay, now I want to make a guess, not for Alex Verus, but for Inheritance of Magic. Were there any Name of the Wind influences on your new book?
No, I read the Name of the Wind and Wise Man's Fear a long time ago, and while I did find them interesting, they didn't really stick with me. Didn't make it any mental.
Yeah, Stephen, were you kind of referring to the focus on money, like
his kind of situation where he's always fighting to keep his head above water with his bills. So that just reminded me a lot of Quoth in Name of the Wind.
No, the Name of the Wind is Name of the Wind and Wise Man's Fear, while they do focus on money, it's college student trying to pay his tuition.
Yeah.
Right.
Type money issues.
And this is just like trying to survive. Yeah.
And that's definitely not the direction I went in with the Stephen Oakwood story.
Interesting.
Had to try.
Name of the Wind is not obscure enough, Stephen. Come on.
Yeah, I guess not. Okay, let's talk about your characters a little bit. So, what's your approach to writing characters to make them believable? Like, I guess with Stephen and Alex are your 2 main focuses. Like, are you just pulling different aspects of their personality from your personal life or from things you see around you, or what's your process?
A lot of my personal life's one of the common things. I think, like a lot of authors, I just use my own life as a reference, as a material source. So one of the most common things that tends to come up is experiences I've had. I'll just pull in and use, like a lot of Stephen's work experience. Some of the stuff from that is pulled from stuff I've done in the past. I think things like his past as a boxer is based off, well, I studied that for a while.
Yeah, I thought that's kind of a similarity between Alex and Stephen, so I thought there may be something from your life in that.
Yeah, I'm a sort of martial arts hobbyist, and I've done a few different ones, so that tended to feed through. In the case of Alex, he doesn't have any one style in particular. In Stephen's case, I made him specifically a boxer. I did that for a year or 2 back in my 20s.
Awesome. Yeah. As you write, what aspects of writing do you enjoy? Do you feel your strong suits? What's more challenging for you?
I don't know, to be honest. With regard to strong suits, I tend to just let readers figure that out. the way I see it is I do my best with everything, but I don't know what I am best at. And I figure in a way it doesn't matter whether I know what I'm best at or not, doesn't matter that much. It's something I just leave for readers to decide. Some people consistently say I'm good at some things, so I guess I'll take their word for it. But it's not something that I don't feel like I'm particularly good at one thing or another, put it that way.
Were there any specific characters in Alex Verus that were just like really natural for you to get in their heads and write their parts, and others that were a little bit, took more revisions? Or
like Alex was always easy to write. I got the hang of him very early on. The one I got most comfortable with writing later on was Luna. And that was kind of interesting because to begin with, Luna was one I really had trouble with in book one. And part of book two, I struggled a lot writing her. Then somewhere around book two, something sort of clicked. And from about book 3, 4 onwards, Luna became one of my favorite characters to write and the one I could do most easily and most naturally. So both Alex and Luna were easy. One who was always difficult, though, who I never really got completely comfortable with, was Anne.
Oh, interesting.
I always found her very difficult to get right.
That's interesting you say that, because I think Anne was probably my favorite character throughout the series. And I think that part of that comes with the almost like mystery or shroud around her, right? Where I think as a character, you're not really sure what to make of her. So maybe that just kind of fed into that, because I don't know, I feel like that was almost part of her character, was that we were always kind of like on our toes around her, although we were not sure why, But
this is the kind of thing I mean about I'm not exactly sure what I'm good at. Because I would never have guessed that Anne was your favorite character from you saying. So
well, I think favorite she's a very unique. Yeah.
So I mostly just listen. I just do my best, and then I listen to what people's feedback is.
Probably a good strategy. Yeah.
Feels like we're kind of shifting into Alex Verus spoiler territory, and when we cover a lot of other things. So let's shift. So now, listeners, like if you haven't read Alex Verus yet, we're gonna talk more directly.
You should read it. Go out and get the first book right now.
First of all, go check it out, and then once you've read it for a few months, come back and listen to the second half of this interview. Okay, so let's talk about Alex Verus, and I think we're gonna immediately start talking about Risen and the end of the series, since that's top of our minds. So and we do have a few questions from friends on Discord who we asked to submit questions for you that also have read the series. So one of them here, I'll just kind of read this out. So in book 12, after Alex dies, quote unquote, there is the kind of the breaking of the fourth wall moment. And so the questions around that, like what your thoughts were in including that, as it's kind of a different feel. Did you was that always part of the plan? Did that just feel natural? Where did that come from?
Neither. That was just purely me having fun and me trolling readers a little bit. Just
okay.
An awful lot of readers would have read the last chapter and be like, "Oh, so tell us what happens." Oh, come on, you're not going to end it like that, are you?
So I have such a massive bone to pick with you then, because
that was just purely me. That was just purely me saying, "Hey, okay, you can stop reading now. I'm sure you totally don't want to know anything else, right?" Right.
Okay, because it was like 1 a.m. when I was finishing reading, and because I couldn't put the book down, right? And so after that scene, I did put the book down, and I was like, I just need to sleep on this and process this death a little bit, because I just want to get on board with it before I see Luna in her shop or whatever. And so I went probably 12 hours with thinking that Alex was just dead. And so anyway, I experienced that ending, or that trolling, with so much impact on me. So I'm still kind of reeling from it. So mission accomplished, Ben. All right.
But yeah, that was just me having a bit of fun after the entire series was basically over.
Yeah.
Since I was feeling fairly lighthearted at that point.
Going into the book, we had speculated, will he survive? Will he die? What's going to happen? Honestly, I think, did we have any solid predictions? Like, I think you said,
I had
Ben,
predicted he would die. Yeah.
Okay. And I thought he was going to survive, but I kind of wanted him to die because at that point I was feeling like it was appropriate. But I guess in book 12, he kind of, yeah, honestly, I think either way would have been okay with me. Did you debate between, I know on your site you have like a whole series of essays about ending series and different things that could have happened, but just like rather than the super dark ending or the super happy ending, did you debate just that one difference of Alex living or surviving?
No, not really. It's that series lays out the whole reasoning in detail, but basically all of the other possible endings, I did consider them and rejected them all for very decisively for very definite reasons. Basically, having the book end in either of those ways would really have changed the overall tone a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like the tone was kind of going darker in the in Fallen, and so I think that it could have matched, but I'm happy that it ended the way it did because I think overall,
I mean, honestly, I think the series was dark enough already. It didn't need to
okay, that's fair.
And then the main character dies and things get even worse afterwards ending.
Uh-huh.
I really did not want to do that.
Yeah, that definitely would have been another layer of darkness to have the main character die. Then you're getting into like George R. R. Martin and Abercrombie territory a little bit.
Yeah, I think that especially because if he had died at the ending, you just wouldn't have been able to see like Anne and Luna process it appropriately, right? Because they would have just been devastated.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've read the sort of alternate ending series, but the most likely ending I could think of, if with Alex dying, was that things end up getting even worse afterwards.
Yeah,
because while Luna and Varian would have been okay, the effect on Anne would have been absolutely devastating. And she really would not have recovered from that.
That's true. I guess you can't just say in a vacuum, what if Alex lived or died? There would have been so many other things that fell out from that. That makes sense. Let's see, another question here. If you were to write the series again, would it be less, more, or same amount of books?
Probably slightly fewer books. Looking back on it with hindsight, I think it had maybe a couple more books than it needed to.
I'm guessing that's because you kind of developed your outline for the series as you went. So I'm assuming that's where that came from.
Pretty much. I mean, to begin with, the series had a lot more of a weekly episode feel to it.
Yeah.
Books 2 and 3 were meant to be sort of semi-self-contained. And it was only after that I started tying everything into a larger story. But
that's kind of rough though, because I feel like there is a place for episodic books. You know what I mean? I feel like that is part of what gives series like these its charm, where you can like have that and then it develops into a whole like overarching plot as well.
No, I think the episodic things at the beginning could have worked. Main thing I would change is there's a bit around the middle. Book 6 wasn't. I think book six Veiled works fine as a standalone, but it doesn't fit into the larger series well. Because it doesn't move the plot forward enough. And
I'm trying to remember. We read these so quickly. Give us the quick recap on Veiled.
Veiled is the one which is sort of like Alex Verus crossed with police procedural, where Alex is working with Calder
and
dealing with the whole child prostitution service.
Right.
Yeah.
And while it does work as its own story, it doesn't advance the main overplot line enough. And one
I
of
can see that.
the issue with it is that you can, when you're reading the series beginning to end, you could largely skip that book, and you wouldn't actually miss that much.
Mm.
And with hindsight, that probably meant that it didn't really need to be there. I could have found a much more economical way of doing the same thing.
Interesting.
Mm.
I think that might have been the book where I really started to enjoy Caldera, though. I don't know. Yeah.
So, well, interestingly, at the time, people didn't seem to find that Caldera to be interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but something I was a bit disappointed by, actually. When I first designed the character, I put quite a lot of sort of
I really liked her. Yeah,
love and care and attention into working out her personality and so on. But then the books came out, and I read like a couple of hundred Goodreads reviews, and there was
that's dangerous.
And there was basically zero reaction to her, and my reaction was like,
Wow.
okay. I guess she isn't really striking a chord with anybody, which is kind of funny, because then much later, once Caldera becomes Alex's enemy, all of a sudden everyone was talking about her.
Okay.
And
Okay.
was
That's
like,
what I was going to ask.
Oh, now you like her.
Yeah, that was kind of one of my burning questions. Was it's a very bold decision not to have Alex reconcile with like Caldera and Sonder, and I think that, you know, I really enjoyed the fact that happened, but it was tough to read because the whole time you're just rooting for them to reconcile. And
I was honestly surprised that people were expecting to happen in the first place, because I'd gone to quite a lot of effort to show that what they believed really just did not mesh with the kind of thing Alex was doing. Like, particularly in the case of particularly with Caldera, there was zero way she could possibly be on Alex's side by the end. Like, her loyalties are the law, the keepers, and the Light Council.
Yeah, she's very like lawful. Yeah,
and Alex is against all three of those things. It's not like there's some sort of conflict going on where it's the lawful versus good thing. It's every single thing that Caldera believes in is something that Alex is on the wrong side of.
Yeah, I think that's what is hard for, I think, me as a reader, because you want to believe that as long as people are following their own like ethics and moral compass, that everybody can get along. And that's just like, it's a hard pill to swallow that's not the case.
Yeah, that's just really not the case. You can get situations like that where people just have such completely incompatible beliefs and incompatible goals that there's no way they're going to get on. Yeah. The only way Alex and Caldera could have reconciled was if Alex was able to make that peace treaty with the council.
Yeah.
And the council just specifically ordered Caldera, okay, he's off the most wanted list. You are officially forbidden from going after him anymore. That's it. We're drawing a line under it. And that would have ended it, but she still wouldn't have liked him afterwards. She still would not have been on his side.
Yeah. And I mean, we saw that Caldera, she wasn't even willing to let it go, you know, when he was found innocent or whatever. She was still the one to kind of dig up the dirty past, you know.
Well, it's the thing, and there was something that interested me, because she thought that he was lying and that he had committed some crimes and was covering it up, and she was completely right.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that was, and then a similar story with Sonder too, right? But it was more with him, it was more just almost a fear-based thing, which I think was laid from the very beginning of his character too. You know, he was a little bit too afraid to get his hands dirty or anything. So, but those two characters were very well done in my opinion. So
I'm glad you like them. Well, I sort of revisited them a bit in the first of the novellas I did, Favors, because that was a Caldera and Sonder one, where plot line is that Sonder comes back to London after having worked in America for a bit and gets called in on a case assisting Caldera. And that was basically an opportunity to develop the two characters a bit.
Yeah, we read those. We haven't had much time after finishing.
I guess haven't done the novellas yet.
But it was sort of but that was sort of interesting because I released it before Risen. So I did find it kind of interesting to think that people were going to read that before finding out what happens to those two characters in book 12.
Yeah.
Speaking of side stories and side characters, another side character, kind of like third tier character that I really enjoyed was Landis. Do you have any are we ever going to get a like spin-off story or anything from his fast? Because
I did actually have I was actually planning this year, after I was done with Inheritance of Magic 2, to do a novella with starring Varium and Landis.
Oh, cool.
And I got as far as working out the general plot and story. The trouble is I'm not going to have time to do it because Inheritance of Magic 2 overran, and now I'm going to have to jump straight into book 3 and focus on it. So it's on the to-do list at some point. Novella with Landis is one of the main characters, but I don't know when I'll get around to it.
Nice call, Stephen. I would appreciate that with maybe a sprinkling of Ji Young. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but we got a little hint of that in the final chapter too.
Yeah, that one I have no idea where that's going to go.
Oh man, okay.
The novella the novella I've got planned is one which is basically revolves around Varium first meeting Landis and the whole sequence that leads Varium to decide to sign up as Landis's apprentice in the first place, since that was something that never got at all covered or explained in the books. So this is way before Ji-Young comes into the picture. I have no idea how the whole thing with Ji-Young and Landis will turn out. That was just a completely random thing I threw.
You hold the power of readers' hearts in your hands when you're just writing lines like that,
Another question here. So on your website, you have a long-running Ask Luna Q&A. How did that come about? And are you planning on doing anything similar for the Inheritance of Magic series?
I remember how it came about. I think where I got the idea for it was from some of the web comics I read. I followed a whole bunch of web comics through the 2000s, 2000 to 2010. That was kind of the big heyday of internet comics, and there was this fun period where people were trying all kinds of random stuff. And one of the things they would occasionally do was have these fourth wall breaking things where characters from the web comics would answer letters from the readers and just addressing the audience directly. I always found them kind of entertaining, so I decided to do a version of that for Alex Verus, just for fun. I don't know if I'll do it with Stephen. There isn't really a character who would be an obvious fit for it, since Stephen's closest companion is his cat. So having letters addressed to the cat would be a little difficult. Like, dear Hobbs, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? Meow, 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 meow.
Okay, so
maybe a sigil in the future, some kind of sigil makes this possible. Who knows?
So you saying that you enjoy comics, is Hobbes now a reference to Calvin and Hobbes, or no?
That's what I assumed.
He's a dual reference to Hobbes from Calvin and Hobbes, but also the person that Hobbes was named after.
Oh,
so Hobbes didn't get his name from nowhere. He was named after
Thomas Hobbes, right?
Old philosopher Thomas Hobbes.
Oh, there you go.
Another layer of philosophy. I'm guessing your background with philosophy is where the those bits come in Inheritance.
Yeah, kind of. It's not the kind of stuff that I ever covered in a philosophy degree, but it probably does relate in.
Nice. Okay, wait. I want to jump back into Alex Verus.
Oh, you have another question?
No, I was going to flip back to our questions.
So this one reads, over the course of a series, one-off characters that are thrown in because you need someone sometimes morph into main characters. Was this the case in anything in Alex Verus? And which were you most happy about, if at all?
Yeah, basically all of them. None of the none of the long running characters, apart from Alex and Luna, were intended to be long running characters. It was always a case
really
of chuck it at the wall and see what sticks. Like Arachne, for instance, was never planned out. She was just a completely random thing I threw in and decided it worked. But Anne and Varium, for instance, were just completely random additions that I made up for book 3. They were characters from an old book that I wrote a few years prior to that. I just needed a couple of Mage Apprentice characters and decided, okay, I'll pick these 2 and chuck them in.
Interesting.
And they ended up working, and I ended up keeping them around. But there were no long-term plans at the time.
Okay,
sorry.
And then the same thing happens in reverse. There were quite a lot of one-off characters that I chucked in that I just dropped.
Yeah. So here's my fan theory question. Maybe feel free to. Okay, this is like, I don't know if it would ever work, but since you brought up Arachne, my theory was that Alex could use the Fate Weaver to walk down one specific path long enough that he encounters Arachne again. You don't have to say if that like is planned or, but would that work?
Ben really wants another Arachne.
I love Arachne. I thought that was such a cool duo, but
basically with just divination it would be impossible. I guess with the Fate Weaver as well it might work. He'd pretty much have to kind of invent something new just to get that functioning.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's my hope. That's my that's my fan theory right there. So
were there any parts of the series you were surprised when fan reaction didn't line up with yours, or things people loved or hated? I guess we kind of talked about Caldera as one example of that. Anything else?
There was that. What are the other ones? Things. Let's see.
I'm guessing people love Hermes. That's probably a given.
Hermes is very popular.
I know when he stepped in front of Richard, I was like, "You better not touch him. Like, just leave Hermes alone."
But people were way more interested in Richard's background and magic type than I'd expected them to be.
Oh, yeah, we spent a fair amount of time talking about that.
Like readers spent a lot of time theorizing about Richard's magic type, and even after that finally got answered, that just transitioned into asking about his origins, and his goals, and what he'd been doing in those years where he was away, and his whole sort of origin story, and yada yada yada. That really did flummox me a bit, because they came up with they were just asking for way more detail than I'd originally figured out. I did have an idea of what he'd been doing and what he wanted and so on, but I was really not expecting the fact that they laser focused on him to such a degree. I guess part of it is the whole sort of mystery box thing, because Alex doesn't know it, therefore the readers don't know it. So readers all sort of assume that there must be some big significance to it.
Yeah.
This actually gets at a question, a little bit of a discussion Ben and I had in our review of Risen that we recorded a few days ago. At what point did Rachel get a djinn? Like, at what point did that happen? Was that before or after Richard went through the portal?
It happened. It's the scene Alex sees in that flashback back in book 4 in Chosen.
Okay.
The same moment she kills Shireen.
Thank you. That was my assumption, Stephen. Yeah. Jeez. Making me doubt myself.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Okay.
That is correct. Yes,
That makes sense.
Basically,
we need to read more closely.
Rachel was the sort of prototype for Richard's experiments in getting Jinn to possess humans, and it only kind of worked.
Oh man, that means that like Rachel's almost like a foil for Anne then.
Yeah, and specifically, she's the initial version that Richard thinks of as a sort of partially successful, partially failed experiment. Not bad, but I can do better for the next time.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, last question. This one's from me. How much research in the London setting do you do? Like, are you going to these places and kind of getting the lay of the land and then writing out scenes, because you have a lot of scenes in different places around London?
Sometimes I go to them. Quite often, these are places that I already know well enough that I don't really need to go to them. But if it's some place that I've visited before, but I don't have a perfect memory of, then I'll often go there. Like for Risen, I went, not for Risen. For Fallen, I went to around the area around Canary Wharf when I was scouting that out for the fight scene around there. For Forged, it was Heron Tower. Poked around the streets there, pasted out, took a look at the sizing and so on. With, can't remember which one it was, Burned maybe? Whichever one had that meeting in the Barbican. I remember skating over there and doing a few loops around it and stuff like that. So I'll do it sometimes, but since I've grown up and lived my whole life in London, I usually have some sort of memory of the area in question, even if it's not perfect, good enough to go off.
Nice.
I really enjoyed that aspect, because earlier this year I came over as a tourist and saw a lot of these places, but it was before I'd read most of the books. So then when I came back and read the books, I was like, I should have poked around a little bit more in the war museums.
One that I did very specifically visit to do the research for was for Fated, the British Museum. I remember specifically going up and down that huge circular staircase in the main lobby and thinking, oh yeah, this would work really well.
When I was there was a strike all week and I couldn't go to the British Museum. It's a huge bummer. I'll have to visit next time. But that makes sense, because you describe like the layout of the museum pretty in depth in that book.
Yeah. Same with, I think one of my favorite action sequences was the tower one. So if it's ever made into like TV show, I would be very much looking forward to that. So
yeah. I'd love it too, but yeah, there have been various people who've expressed some interest in doing a TV adaptation, but it never really turns into anything. It's incredibly difficult to actually get something made as a TV series until it's famous enough that you don't need it to be made into a TV series.
Especially nowadays, I'm sure it's very difficult to get anything made into TV.
Yeah, although one does wonder sometimes, given the kind of stuff that gets put out.
Yeah, right.
The trouble is, you get it's all stuff that is the favorites of whoever the current crop of people in Hollywood are.
Yeah.
So you get some things that get done to death over and over and over again, but not so well-known book series tend to languish a bit.
Yeah, and then you still have the question of if it's going to be true to the books. I mean, I don't know if you watch any of the Dresden TV show that came out, but
yeah,
I mean,
that one was famous, and I don't know. It's honestly as regards TV adaptations, my feelings have shifted on it a lot, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And that was the days before there were really many fancy adaptations, and back then, and me and my friends would talk about, we have all these book series and they never get turned into anything. Wouldn't it be so awesome if our favorite book series could get turned into a TV series and a movie? Yeah, that would be awesome. It's really annoying that this never seems to happen. And now I'm at this age, all of the stuff I read and loved back in the 80s and 90s has been and is being turned into adaptions. And my reaction is, you know what? I've changed my mind.
Just leave it. Yeah.
Just leave it. Please stop doing these. Maybe wait until. Could we just wait another 20 years for the current crop of Hollywood writers to move out, get replaced with a new one or something? Because I don't really want to keep on seeing this.
I can appreciate that. That's a hot take. I've been feeling a little burnt out as well with this is ironic coming the eve before Wheel of Time season 2 comes out. So
yeah.
Yeah, and I was really, really not impressed with season 1 of Wheel of Time. So that I'm afraid that one kind of crushed my hopes and dreams
for
adaptations in a really big way. Since I'm a massive fan of the Wheel of Time series, and I was really looking forward to seeing something like that. And then we get the show we've got, and it turns out that the show writer isn't actually interested in the existing story at all. He just wants to do his fanfic series where Maureen's the main character instead.
Yeah, I could see that. The one hope I have is still that Sanderson has enough FU money that he's able to just do what he wants with it. So, not with Wheel of Time, but with his whatever stuff. Series he.
Yeah, I think with Sanderson would be able to get away with that because he's A, got FU money, and B, he's alive. So it's a lot harder to do these kinds of complete steamroller over the existing story adaptations when the writer's not in the coffin already.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay, since you're a big Wheel of Time fan, I've been wanting to ask this question, but I don't want to spoil Wheel of Time for anyone. So in just real vagaries, was the end of Alex Verus at all inspired by what happens at the Wheel of Time with one character?
It's a no.
Do you know what I'm trying to hint at?
I know what you're hinting at, but no, the Wheel of Time did influence the Alex Verus series, but it wasn't in that. It was in much earlier stuff. One of the concepts you have in the Wheel of Time is they have what the characters in the Wheel of Time call vacuoles, which are sort of little tiny pocket realities separated from.
Right, yeah, sure. The Shadow Realms.
That was one of the influences I had in the bubble realms in Alex Verus. And the whole sort of the way Wheel of Time does alternate and parallel realities was something that influenced Alex Verus, and elsewhere in Alex Verus has got some elements in common with television in Wheel of Time.
Definitely. That's on the nose. I should have been able to come up with that one.
Also, I think one of you guys might have guessed it, but the bubble realm in Burns, the one that Alex goes into with the special ops team to try and retrieve that ring.
Mm-hmm.
That was fairly strongly influenced by the ways from the Wheel of Time.
Interesting.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I do remember talking. Yeah,
someone actually. I remember one of you guys actually specifically commented on that. I remember, but that was one just because I always thought the ways were one of the best done aspects of the Wheel of Time. They were just sort of amazingly creepy.
Nice.
And it's a really good example of one of those things where in theory it gives you this extremely powerful ability to fast travel and cross the continent in an amazing sort of time. But after having been in there once, you can immediately see why nobody ever wants to go back there. It's like, okay, in theory, we can use this to cross the world really fast, but you have to be really, really desperate to be willing to go back in there.
Yeah. Foundational series for us as well. It's fun to hear how much it influenced you.
I think Robert Jordan was one of the best fantasy writers America ever produced. I can't think of any ones that are better off the top of my head.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, him and
it's interesting in that he's a very specifically American one. I always thought in the main three characters, Rand, Mad, and Perrin, are actually rather specific archetypes that you get from American popular culture, but not particularly European.
Yeah, man, you have such deep views into these things. I'm really inspired. I guess that's what it takes to become an author, though. You know, you have to kind of understand things on a deeper level than most people think about.
Well, cool. I think that's a wrap for our interview with Benedict. Thank you so much for joining the show and for all the insights into your upcoming book and in Alex Verus. So I guess we're looking forward to October 5th or 10th for An Inheritance of Magic. And I suppose people can just support by pre-ordering the book and all that. And it's available at all the usual places.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, you guys. It's been really fun getting to talk to you. And thanks for the long series you did on with your Alex Verus reviews.
We really enjoyed it.
They've been what, like, you've done like seven-ish of these podcasts. I've lost track exactly how many there are, but it's always really, as an author, it's always really nice to find that readers are that interested, that they're willing to invest that much time into it.
No, we're always looking for new things to talk about.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on.
Welcome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Benedict. See you later.